So, continuing on my series of How Old Are You, Grandpa? Which, as I say, I'm pretty sure at least one of my grandkids would be saying. I thought I'd cover a topic that, okay, most of my grandkids probably won't understand, but I thought I'd cover a topic of, let's say, I have a dream. Yeah, I know that's a bit iconic, but we'll come back to that. In the 80s this time, so we're going back further, I was working for a very large company that has offices all over the country. The office I was in Harlow, big site. The office I was in probably had at least 100 people in. I don't know how many people on the site, but a lot of people. And I was working as an engineer. We have lots of engineers there. There were other types of people. So there were managers in little side offices. They didn't have a computer terminal. What they had was a secretary and bits of paper and possibly a audio recorder thing. So they record stuff. Dictaphone, that was it. That's what it was called, dictaphone. Dictaphone. Yeah, I'm sure there's some innuendo there. But anyway, they had a dictaphone. And they'd use that and the secretaries would type stuff up. But all of us, the engineers and the secretaries, had computer terminals. Now, if you don't know what a computer terminal is, this is a picture of a computer terminal I found on the internet, and it's called an ADM3A. This is the sort of terminal I used when I was at uni. Before that, I think we had something a little bit more modern. I'm pretty sure the secretaries had a really modern, like orange on black, not green on black. But basically, this was 80 columns, 25 lines with a keyboard. No mouse. There was no mouse. And that's what we worked with. That's how we worked. I wrote code on that. I wrote a shitload of documentation on that. That was my working day. And for most of us in the office, we were sat there at a table with a terminal. And possibly lots of paperwork. So let's come back to the whole concept of I have a dream here. All of those terminals connected back to the computer room. It was possibly the only room in the entire office that had air conditioning, and it had a couple of sysadmins and had backup tapes and stuff they had to do. And each of the computers in the computer room, and I think they had 3 for the whole of the site, was a huge, great big rack of equipment. And so all the engineers were like on one of them. I'm not sure why there were 3, but it was all split out. I did a project later on where I did a whole consolidation of user IDs across 3 different. I was tasked with writing code at a really low level to change user IDs on every file on the entire directory on a Unix system, on 3 Unix systems, to make them consistent. And boy, were those sysadmins really panicky about my abilities to do that right. You wouldn't believe it. Anyway, it worked. I did it. And I wrote it in the best possible way with redundancy. It changed everything to different user IDs and then changed them all back. It was lovely stuff in terms of Unix file system management, ownership and permissions and symbolic links and directory parsing and all this stuff. And none of that will mean anything to my grandkids, sorry. So back to I have a dream. Okay. I don't usually remember my dreams in any detail. I mean, I remember them when I wake up and then forget them. Just occasionally I'll remember the topic of a series of dreams. I hope you're like me. I hope I'm not alone. But I will have a dream. I will go to bed thinking about something and I'll dream, and the next day I'll progress that dream, the next day I'll progress that dream. And then it goes nowhere, But it's fun dreaming. And the reason I remember this dream is because of how impossible the dream was. So I had this dream over many days, and if you're like me, you end up bogged down in the detail of the dream. It's mad. And the dream was, could I ever own one of these types of real computers? I had a BBC Micro. I had a microcomputer. I did not have a Unix-based computer. I can't remember what flavour of Unix it was, but it was Unix-based. And it was a dream, literally a dream, that one day I would have enough money and space and time to own an actual real computer, a real Unix computer. And I remember having that dream, and I remember having it because it was an impossible dream. What I didn't know is probably within 10 years from that, I mean, getting the exact dates right, but I would say around 10 years later, I had a PC, as it was. So obviously I had BBC Micro and all sorts of stuff, but I had a PC. And we finally got to the stage in the 90s where you could have a PC installed with Linux, a flavour of Unix. Don't beat me up on that. It's a flavour of Unix, one way or another. It's moved on, I know, but... So I had a PC in my study, under my desk, and it was on all the time, obviously, because it's a server. It had a website, it had permanent internet connection, it had databases. It became the basis of the entire invoicing system we now use for the company. It's moved on a lot since then, but it was. And so I actually had a Unix system, and that was my dream realised in as little as 10 years. These days, it's just got silly. A Raspberry Pi, a tiny little microcontroller box you can get, is a Linux system with more power than any of those computers we had in the office. But everybody has a bloody Unix system now. I mean, it's in your telly, it's in your pocket, it's on your wrist. My snom phone here, I think, runs Linux. Everything. It is so common. There's probably nobody that doesn't have a fundamentally Unix-based computer in their house now, one way or another. Even if they don't know it and they don't know how to administer it and they don't have root access and they haven't got a clue how it works, they have one. So that was one hell of a dream. And what gets me is I remember having the dream, and I remember how impossible the dream was. How could I possibly ever get one of these, in today's money, probably hundreds of thousands of pounds, at least, computer systems in my own home? How could I possibly get one of those? And then what would I do with it? Because bear in mind, most of this was before the internet. So having got a hugely expensive computer system in my own home, I'd be the only user. I'd be the one with one of those terminals connected by serial ports back to the computer. I'd be the only one. Why would I have one for me alone? So yes, that's today's episode of Really, how old are you, Grandad? That's how old I am.